Well, Jean, we're at the bottom of the hour, and before everyone else got on, actually, I was having just a small discussion with Jeff about the 1918 pandemic and the things that he learned in college about it, and I'm trying to read about it. But we were talking about what happens if this wraps back around in the fall, like we keep hearing about. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for joining. So, Jean, if you want to just kick us off and let's do a little talking about the 30,000-foot view, and let's have some discussion today.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this. My wife says that every day I have so many words to use, and if I don't use them during my normal workday, she gets burdened with them by the end of the evening. So here you go.
Your wife is a saint.
Oh, gosh, she has to be. So as Mark Twain noted, and we quoted the book Bridges Across Every Divide, the quote from Mark Twain about history seldom repeats, but it will often rhyme. And we think that that's what we're living in right now. Now, the other thing everybody needs to know is that we think that the Dunning-Kruger disease is also running rampant. And for those of you who are not familiar with Dunning-Kruger disease, what it states, and you can go ahead and Google this on another device while you're sitting there, they actually, it's a parapsychologist did this analysis. They said that the more you know about something, the more sure you are of your knowledge. And as you begin to gain over time more and more expertise in this and more experience, you begin to doubt everything you know. And so when it comes to doing this type of stuff, I put myself definitely on the left-hand side of the Dunning-Kruger curve and going, I still know nothing. Okay. But if there's one thing that we've been able to look at and long-term been able to tease out from all these crises is that they tend to take trends that have been accelerating over a 20-year time span. It condenses them down now to 20 months. And we'll just talk a little bit about the Spanish flu. One of the more interesting things about the Spanish flu that we do not talk about that much is that it was also deadly for horses. And if you want to read more about this, I would encourage the book Pale Rider. It came out in 2017 by Spinney. And the reason I suggest that book is that it's able to take advantage of the most recent DNA studies, but also occurred before we got into this kerfluffle. So it's fairly non-politicized, doesn't have a big axe to grind. But one of the things that they found was that, remember in the spring of 1918, they had the flu, the Spanish flu came through. It died away in the summer, but when it came back in the fall, it was much more deadly. And one of the things that they think may have occurred is that that also infected the horses. And the horses experienced a massive mortality rate in Belgium at the war front. And they think that what may have happened was that humans transmitted it to horses. They became quite ill, and then they brought it back to humans. Excuse me. And that's what made the fall event of 1918 so much more deadly than the spring one. So what we may see is that the virus will subside this summer, come back in the fall. But the other unknown is that now we have better technology. We can now do testing. We're now coming out with these antibody tests. But as far as what we're concerned here about today, interactions with the populations that we deal with, one of the things that we need to understand is that for most local governments and state governments, you can reasonably expect them to have a 20 to 25% loss of revenue in the short term. And even if we all decide to relax, that we're not going to be under official lockdowns, you have a large population of folks who are simply not going to re-engage in the economy. So what you're looking at here is anywhere from a 20% contraction of your state and governmental revenues to a best case scenario many of us think is a 10%. And one of the things I'm involved in here in Ohio is that we're starting to have conversations here about how do local governments declare bankruptcy? What are the implications of that and what happens? So what the folks that you deal with in your local welfare agencies, your local welfare offices that get funding from the state, your county commissioners, your mayor's situations may be having some severe financial distress moving forward. So the question is, what are you all seeing at your local level, your states? How are they handling this? And if you picked up any, shall we say, rumblings about how they are going to be handling this, and how are you going, have you folks begin to give any thought to what I'm somewhat inaccurately still calling the old poor and the new poor problem? The new poor problem is everybody is, like for example, CPAs now getting laid off. That's the new poor. These are people who never before thought they'd ever have to go through a food bank drive-up line. And the old poor, people who've been struggling through poverty for a long time. Have you all had any thoughts on this? Have you given this any thought? Do you have any strategies moving forward? That's it.
Thanks, Gene. I see a question. Any ideas how many municipalities or counties you think will go bankrupt? Has any economists coming out with that?
There's an article almost every day in Governing Magazine. Governing Magazine has a wonderful online service, and I would suggest for those of you, even though this is not normally within your wheelhouse, to get online to the governing.com has a every morning recap of some of the news going on in local governments, and it's able to give you a really good resource for that. I would estimate in Ohio, which has 88 counties, you may see 60 of the counties come close or actually tip over into bankruptcy. About 1,200 municipalities, of which you probably see half that number get close enough. They have to declare fiscal emergencies and things of this nature. It's going to get quite grim for a whole lot of the local governments. And I'm just talking more about Ohio, but the Governing Magazine also describes it nationally, and that's pretty much what we're going to see nationally too.
You all are welcome to unmute yourselves. I have everyone muted so we can hear, but if you have a comment you'd like to talk about, then please unmute, ask a question. I live in Kansas, and our governor yesterday just extended our stay-at-home, our shelter-in-place through May 3rd. Anyone else having extensions, or what's your date? Where are you living, and what's your stay-at-home date at this point?
Dominique and I are in South Dakota, and there are no stay-at-home orders right now. Every city is having to come up with their own stuff, and it's just a bit chaotic with the government agencies from local to state trying to have something kind of cohesive across the board. So yeah, there's no stay-at-home orders, but very strongly, encouraging everyone to keep social distancing and things like that.
And for many people, that's a different definition than what mine is. Social distancing. That's what gets me a little concerned. When I yesterday was taking dinner to my aunt, and I had I think they're high school age, which I love high school age kids, but I had 4 of them roar past me on their motorcycles. They were out riding, and I'm thinking, okay, I get it. They're not touching each other, but for me, it means stay at home. So
one of the things that are for folks out there, you've had problems with your populations that are supposed to do certain things online, either study online for those in education, or for many of if you're in the poverty wing of this, you're supposed to apply for your unemployment benefits online, but they do not have the internet, they do not have a computer. And have you, I see Maureen nodding her head, yes. And so have you encountered this, and have you had any solutions come up with this there locally?
Good question. Yeah, that seems to be a problem, is the lack of computers. And with everything being shut down, like the libraries and things like that, um, you know, it just, I don't know. It's just, it's been so challenging.
So
You know?
does anybody have in their state because this is traditionally what we've always said to folks who do not have a computer or internet at home is, oh, go to the public library and
Right.
apply for,
Mhm.
these benefits, find out about how to get these jobs, but is anybody have libraries considered to be an essential service in anybody's state? I'm looking up. So, and and Megan, how do you pronounce your governor's name? Noem. How do you pronounce that?
No, Christy
No,
Rome.
no. Okay,
No.
because she's been quite prominent in the circles that I follow from public policy world. But her attitude of this is just not my
It's a
not a
very
problem.
Midwestern attitude, very Midwestern.
Yep, not a problem. So, if you're so, go ahead. Sorry, Maureen.
Oh, I was just going to say, as far as like unemployment and those types of services, we have been working with the Career Link, and they've been doing like not online, but they've been fielding phone calls. So they've been kind of like setting up shop for like 4 to 7 for people to call in with questions. And they've been kind of fielding things through emails and the computer, like by that way. Now I don't know how that's working. I mean, if that's easier than, I mean, it probably is easier than I mean, when you think about the overload of how many millions of people are collecting unemployment or applying, and the numbers are so crazy about the wait times on the phones and not getting their PIN numbers, and here it's going on 6 weeks and no income and all that kind of stuff. It's just insane.
So I noticed. So Megan and Treasure, you're both doing the classes now online, and what issues have that raised for you?
We overcame the lack of Wi-Fi fairly easily. We have people drive into the McDonald's parking lot and things like that to use Wi-Fi, so they can be in the class, because we found it was very important for them to still get their stipend. And so we decided to overcome any barrier that we could to make sure that they were able to get that. Right now they're doing their assessments, and they are calling the community leaders to get information for their assessments. And they are amazed at how willing our community leaders are willing to share with them all the details about what's going on and filling out their assessments really well, and they're reporting, and they're having an amazing experience and the Zoom hasn't hindered us at all as a class. They really look forward to meeting together every Tuesday night, seeing each other's faces, because their lives are pretty chaotic and scary, and it's a nice break for them to reduce and just create some normalcy.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think, and this is maybe a premature question, Treasure,
Okay.
Moving forward, would this type of virtual class work, you think, moving forward as a model to use? Or is it just a one-off because of the COVID and that people are going to do it now? They would prefer to meet in person.
We teach relationships are
Yeah.
the most important thing. And I feel like Treasure's opinion is in-person relationships are always the best, but I figure it could go either way. Depends on who the people in the class are, who the leaders are, and the cheerleaders that are helping them get to know each other, and how well they can bond over virtually. But I prefer in person, just because I'm here at my house alone and I'm missing people. I'm probably
to your cats and your raccoons, we understand. And
I'm a little biased, but I need personal interaction.
Okay. All right.
I just wanted to kind of provide an overview, because something that you said, Jean, was deeply frightening, and I'll explain why, right? But I and a lot of the people that I've been working with have been really adapting well to the situation and figuring out how to support getting ahead grads in these circumstances. So that's one level of what we're talking about. Like, how do we continue to support people given the current circumstances in the crisis so that they are supported, that they don't suffer, and so that they can get back on track. And then another level of that is all the learning that all of us have been doing about, like, we've had this opportunity to go, oh, when there's a crisis, people can really change things. Like, right? We've changed policies, we've changed laws, we've taken these incredible steps to change stuff. And there's a way that that's been hopeful. It's unfortunate that it took a pandemic in Lucas County for them to relax the regulations on how often you have to re-up your benefits. So one of the things I've been saying is it took a pandemic to eliminate agency time. Right? Yeah. But we did it. So we're seeing that we can do things that will make sense for people. So one of the things we've been looking at is how do we identify and describe and track policy changes that we've made now that we want to keep after the pandemic is over. So that's another thing, right? So I've been really excited about both those things. How do we adapt to the situations now to support people? How can we change things in the future to better support people? Then what you just laid on us, which I have not been trying to think about, was how devastating this might be for how long, right?
Yeah.
Economically, that's like a whole other thing that I haven't really thought about, and that's deeply concerning, right? Because we want to, like, how can we build now to support that deep pain of however long the recovery takes, right? What can we do? And it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that one.
And you lay out another point too. And anytime, Stephen, you're feeling upbeat and bubbly, you just give me a call and I'll just hammer you right back down to the earth. The Ohio House.
Thank you, Gene.
Anytime.
Yeah.
The Ohio House of Representatives has formed a task force to look at just the business aspect of the impact of the COVID-19 in Ohio. And they had a very interesting hearing yesterday where the business people came in and they said they were afraid that the generous unemployment benefits would incentivize their current / former staff not to come back to work when things picked up. And for those who don't know, I'm a pedigree Republican, and my Republican cohorts were all going, oh yeah, we can see that. So I'm sitting here and I'm reading about this and I'm going, obviously the business people and my Republican friends in the House have no idea how poor people, those who are poor and working poor, really want to move up that economic ladder. And they're not just sitting there going, wow, I wish I could get another government handout on this whole thing. And has anybody encountered, so that kind of brings me, Stephen brought that up, that's what kind of jogged my memory on all this. And I'm going, does anybody else have you encountered that in your states? And I'm thinking up in the Dakotas and Oklahoma, reliably red states, Kansas. How is this? Well, you have a Democrat governor now in Kansas.
Yeah.
So you have a mixed house there. So how's this all playing out in your respective communities, too?
Well, this is Dominique. I have a daughter that is a CNA that's getting her license, her LPN license, and she saw some of the people getting laid off in healthcare even, and she said, well, they're making more money than I am when I'm picking up all these shifts. And I kind of thought about it, that she was like, I could just go on unemployment and just stay there and finish school. So yeah, it kind of brought up some questions to me too.
Okay.
I've noticed
I'll chime in. Oops, excuse me, go ahead.
sorry, some of the people in our classes are saying, I work a frontline job at McDonald's, and instead of firing us, they're just lowering our hours to 5 to 10 hours a week. I can't live on that. I don't know what I'm going to do.
So they'd be better off if they were just simply to cut bait and fish.
But you can't quit. If you quit, you don't qualify for unemployment.
So that was my question is, we're all sheltered at home, we're all working, we're all paid, but what about our getting ahead graduates? How many of them are on the front line? How many of them have been cut? How many of them can continue to work at paid? As you do your getting ahead classes, what are you seeing? Are they totally out of work?
It all depends on the field that they're in. So we've got a lot of graduates that have been through the Health Professional Opportunity Grant. So they're in healthcare and they're all working. We also have a lot of grads that worked for the YMCA in childcare, and all their childcare centers were shut down. But they're moving over to other industries that are a good fit for them. So a lot of them are working with DD populations now. So if the jobs are available, people are working. That's my experience with our grads.
One thing I was going to say, if I could, Gene.
Yeah.
If you mentioned earlier about the people just staying on welfare, politics aside from it, of course, I'm coming from Texas, is where I'm at. But whenever they said our budget, it was based on oil being over $50 a barrel. It's at $20 a barrel now. And when you talked about governments going broke earlier, they're not going to be able to continue to give those robust amounts of money to people that are unemployed if they go broke. Somehow we're going to have to go back to work, but I don't know what the new normal will look like because of the reentry, what jobs there will be, who can work, who will work. I think those are all things that the country's got to play out ahead of us.
And one of the obligations on this call is to kind of discuss the 30,000 foot level. And if any of you know me personally, I'm closer to the 30,000 foot level than most other people. Okay, that was a joke. You are allowed to laugh. I know I can't hear you because you're on mute. Is that what we're seeing, and there's been a fair amount of buzz about this in the universe that I associate with, is that the governors, mostly by and large, of the 50 governors, at least 40 of them are doing a fairly decent job of managing this crisis as it relates to their states. It's the federal government where everybody, both sides of the aisle, are going, this is not going as well as what it should. And there's been some buzz that this is going to actually increase the calls for federalism and to have states take on more responsibility. And then the question is that if this much of the programs that we interact with at the state level and the local level, if more power comes back to the states for that, how do you see that beginning to interact with what it is that you do? So in other words, if you're working closely with your local welfare agencies, but all of a sudden they are freed from most federal rules and regulations, is this a good thing for you? Is it a bad thing for you? Or is it just a thing that you will adapt to? And if they are given more flexibility, what would you want to do to be able to go ahead and get that so that your programs can become more viable and have better outreach? I just threw a lot at people there, didn't I?
Yep.
Jeff, you were talking about you're coming from Texas and you're an educator. What's the buzz? What are you thinking about for fall?
Well, right now, the major concerns on the floor with superintendents that I'm speaking to are, number one is we're trying to feed the kids currently. Two, we have some type of alternative learning going on. And then three, right now, the big buzz this week in Texas is there's talk of the governor may lift the restriction and local schools will have to make the choice where they go back in May for about 3 weeks of school. So those are the big three things that are on the table right now. Now, the fall, the question with that's coming in is, okay, where do we go from here? Are we going to start earlier? Does the state want us to do that? Are we going to have longer days? And then if the second wave comes through, what happens? And so nobody really knows the answer to that. It's the new normals. But in Texas, there's lots of buzz about trying to get the economy back up and going because they're scared to death of the economy falling apart. And they're talking about the governor is supposed to lay out a reentry plan this week to start small businesses. And there may be some pressure on schools to start just basically for daycare, more or less. But those are the things we're running into right now at the moment.
How do you think your program will adapt?
The school districts will adapt however they have to. I mean, it'll be Darwinism. We'll have to do it, so we'll make it work with it. I wonder myself personally, and this is not from the state, if there'll be some form of hybrid, since we've gone to a lot of online learning, if we'll do some of that, yet we'll have the other at school. Of course, finance is going to be a big issue. Again, the state is losing a lot of money. What can they afford to give us going forward? And what cuts have to be made? And from that, everybody will just do like we did it back in the 07-08 recession. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to have been around through that. And I was even around before that in Texas one time when we had a proration. And they actually cut us during a budget year one time. So I think all of those things are on the table. But what's not going to be something that you can negotiate is you're still going to have to educate students. You're still going to have to feed students and have a safe place for them. And so we're going to have to come to terms with dealing with that over the next year or two in whatever way we do it. I personally don't think this is going to be something that's going to go away in 5 or 6 months. And I'm not talking about the disease. I'm talking about the aftermath of the disease, the economy, people back to work, having jobs like they did. Those type of things I think are going to be, far reaching.
And Jeff, earlier you mentioned the fact that in Texas, your state budget's predicated on oil being about $50 a barrel, and now it's in the 20s. So for Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, the Dakotas, I think Wyoming, also Ohio and Pennsylvania, because of the extensive fracking going on here.
Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado, you have a lot of fracking going on there too. So local governments and state governments, and here's something I want to emphasize. As you sit there, you may be very familiar with how your state government or your local governments get funded from this. Every state is completely different. Some states, the cities are highly dependent upon income taxes. In other states, the cities rely more upon property taxes. I believe Tennessee is all about sales tax at the city level. So this is going to be a very difficult nut for us to crack, in that it's going to impact everybody individually. It's going to be very hard to have a federal response to it, I guess at the end of the day, is what I'm trying to say, is because this is going to be, a lot of people think that economics is a lot like, one of my favorite analogies is soft butter spread on fresh toast that goes along evenly. In reality, most economic impacts are more like cold butter on Wonder Bread. It's kind of lumpy. And so you're going to see certain states and regions have a disparate impact upon this. And it's also going to be about the local leadership. I mean, I'm looking up there, I see Stephen, and just north of Stephen in the same media market, Michigan is having a devastating impact from the COVID-19. And Ohio has flattened down the curve on this. But so, Treasurer, how are things we talked about extraction dependent states, okay, Oklahoma, you're either oily or cattle, okay, and how are things going there for the locals and the state?
So for the state, the oil crisis is definitely going to be a huge impact. For the city, our city is completely run off of sales tax, which is way down. And so they're devastated, and I don't know how they're going to recover. The only other thing is your hotel motel tax or your tourism tax, which is also completely gone. So the tourism industry is tanking as well. So I don't know how we're going to recover from it. It's going to take some innovative creativity, I think, on everyone's part, and we have to pray our leadership can do that.
Do you think that the citizens of Oklahoma, which is a very, very, very conservative state, would be willing to accept a tax increase to get through this COVID-19 crisis?
I think we have so many people below the poverty line that it's not even going to be possible.
Because you have nobody to tax.
Right.
Okay. You can't get blood out of a turnip.
Correct.
Okay. All right. What are other folks hearing in your states and localities as to how this is unfolding and the impact? By the way, anybody here from higher education? Because higher education is also going to it'll be one of the ones that undergo a heavy cut too.
Yeah, this is Travis in Nevada, and I'm with a local community college. We are definitely already seeing the impact. They're going to be cutting spending, cutting salaries, increasing. It's going to increasing student fees and things like that. So we're definitely being impacted.
So Travis, let me ask you this question. So one of the big concerns for many of us on the call is the first time for the student who's the first member of their family to go off to college. Okay, how do you expect this to impact that population? Do you have any ideas on how we can soften this blow for them?
Well, so one of the big concerns is that we're already as a college exploring, and it's not just the community college, so statewide they're exploring online and hybrid classes. And you know, most of the students that we work with definitely prefer and need the hands-on, in-person type of classroom experience. And so online, while it is, you know, it offers a lot of flexibility, but for those learners that are kind of typically in our getting ahead classes, they don't like the online classes. So
Why?
Because you know, it requires a lot of self-discipline. It requires the ability to learn in a way that they may not be used to. You know, a lot of them just need that more, I guess, hands-on, or they need the ability to talk to their instructor when they don't understand something. And that is much more difficult, you know, online. They can email, but I've had a lot of my students, they'll email me so that I can mediate between them and the instructor. They're intimidated by instructors. So it's a huge problem.
Do you have any idea how to, in the future, make instructors seem less intimidating to especially the first generation student?
Well, you know, instructors love using big words, and you know,
Okay.
that's a tough one. They, you know, faculty love to make sure that their rigor is up to snuff, and so it's that's a challenging one. I don't know. I think they can, you know, we are exploring that, right? As a college, we're exploring what things we can do, how we could be prepared for ongoing quarantines and campus closures and things like that. But there aren't any solid solutions, except for we know there's going to have to be a lot of retraining going on.
So let me ask you all this question. So when we talk about the populations that we serve, it's a large amorphous group. And I'll go back to my earlier analogies. It's more like cold butter on Wonder Bread. It's kind of lumpy. Are there groups, entities out there, classifications, types that are harder hit in this than the other typical group that comes through your program or your system?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that question directed at me? I didn't.
Everybody.
Oh.
Everybody. But you go ahead, Travis. Jump in.
Sorry, I don't have a good answer for that question.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have the answer for it either. That's why I threw it out there. Yeah. Has it been, younger people, older people, single moms, minorities? By the way, one of the things I've been wondering about this, for those of you, now I've been to Muskogee, delightful town. You don't have a whole lot of transit. So if the transit has now been suppressed due to people not wanting to socially gather on a bus, you're very car dependent there, which I think is why your McDonald's works out. About everybody has to have a car to get around. But for those communities that are more transit dependent, how are you able to adapt to that and get your populations, your programs, your participants where they need to be, or has that not been a problem for you yet at this time?
Well, I'll jump in. At our food pantry, we've started a delivery service, and it's gone over well. We've been averaging 6 to 8 deliveries a day.
Okay. How many do you think you could handle?
Comfortably, 20 to 30.
Okay.
I know I'm in Colorado. We have a pretty good transit system, and a lot of our families depend on the bus. We can still use the bus, but they limit it to 10, and you have to go in through the back. You can't walk in front of the bus driver. But for my families, if they're dependent on the bus, I deliver to them. So like on the nights that they would normally drive through our schools and pick up their food and their gift card and all that, if they are dependent on public transportation, I just deliver it to them myself. And a lot of our people in our organization are doing that. So, and then like we have food distributions, we were doing those on every Wednesday through Catholic Charities. And for those that aren't able to drive, we have a delivery system set up. All of us who have families put our families' names in this Excel spreadsheet, and then we have volunteers within our organization that deliver to them. So we try to make it where they don't have to drive or find a ride or a bus or whatever for our programs.
One of my big fears moving forward in this is that there's going to be, because transit, in many of the larger cities, nobody's taking it because they don't want to get exposed and, because of that type stuff. And that this is going to lead to a budget crunch for transit, but it's also going to lead to a lack of support for transit by the rest of the community. And I know I'm looking here at for Bill and Ruth on this, because I know for both of you, you use a lot of transit or talk a lot about transit for getting your people to their jobs. And in the case of up in Miami County, where you are, Bill, I'm thinking it's paratransit. And how's that been affected?
So the nonprofit, our organization we started that is providing transit, it closed up 2 weeks ago, basically because 90% of the places where we were sending people to work shut down.
Wow.
So it didn't make sense to keep that operational. We got word today from one of the nonprofits that the county is shutting their transit system down altogether. And I don't know why that is, because we are hearing stories of folks that need to get to work, that need that service, that aren't getting it. So I don't know why it's shutting down, but it is. And our transit system is more of a demand response system rather than a fixed route system. So very rarely do you have more than 2 or 3 people on one of the transit buses at any one time. So it's obviously not it could be a safety issue, but it's not like you're running it in a larger community where you have more than 10 people on a bus. Yeah. I don't know what's happening there.
Okay. If you do find out, could you let everybody know?
Yeah.
It'd be curious to find out what's been the rationale for that. Anybody else have any interactions with transit and workforce?
In Denver, the transit is continuing, but they're canceling. They keep canceling. Oh, we're canceling this route. We're canceling this time. And so it's creating, I'm hoping to hear from more of workplace stability trainers as the week goes on to see what's happening in their areas. But I think a lot of those plants are just just closing down.
So looking at Ruth reminds me of, there's several aspects of this crisis we're in. One of them is health and everything, but the other one is, of course, what we hear from business is, you need to relax the restrictions and everything. From a workforce development aspect, and I'm thinking of Ruth, I'm thinking of Stephen now too, how are you seeing this play out on your ability to place graduates? Are your graduates still being successfully placed? And the overall impact of this on workforce?
Well, one of the things I was thinking when you asked some of your earlier questions is, how do we, I think in terms of being hurt, like the extent to which getting ahead grads and Bridges communities, the Bridges communities are really listening to the grads for what they're dealing with and supporting them through this. And then based on their direction and the information that those getting ahead grads are giving, that the communities are able to support them through whatever difficulties they have. And in the transition, when people are going back to work and when the economy is powering up again, are they going to be at the head of the line?
Yeah.
In terms of being, it's almost more like one of the things when you said who's getting hurt, that question you asked, who's getting hurt by this? I think in terms of the pandemic, it's clear that the people that are getting hurt are people of color, are people in poverty, are underrepresented groups. It's the people that are having to work to survive and having to take public transportation that are hurt by that. And it's really hard, it's like everybody's going to be hurt. But as you said, when we're looking back at this in 5 years, we're going to see who got hurt more than other groups, and your Wonder Bread. Right. But I think what I do know, like I was on an ERN meeting this morning, the Employer Resource Network meeting, and what it was very clear to me was that this ERN in Toledo, these businesses at the table and the employees are doing better because they've got a success coach that's supporting them to apply for benefits and to find housing and to deal with domestic violence. And so those employees are in a better position, and also the businesses are in a better position. And because they know Bridges, because they have the Bridges information and they've been through workplace stability, and the employees have been through getting ahead, they're in a stronger position to bounce back. So I know that.
So let me make this suggestion, and we can apply this then across the country. So I know that in Ohio, and for those who don't know, Stephen's located in Toledo/Lucas County. The Ohio House of Representatives is having these task force hearings going on. They're virtual, okay? So my suggestion would be to have the people you just talked about on that ERN meeting, ask and see if you can get them on the agenda to testify remotely on one of these task force hearings to talk about their success. And this is the thing I'm going to suggest to everybody who's have anybody here from Canada? No? Well, okay, yes, you're somewhat Canadian. We understand. Would be almost every state and a lot of your cities are soon going to be having these task forces to look at how do we respond to the COVID-19. It's going to have a different flavor in every state, but please make sure that you can get in case of Stephen, you want your business people, because especially if your state is run by Republicans, they'll pay more attention to the business people than will anybody else. But also, most importantly, then get the getting ahead graduate or the other person who has come out of your program, if it's in education or wherever, and get them in front of your ruling elite and say, this has been our experience, and this is why we think we're better prepared. Because what I'm hearing from you, Stephen, is that this is devastating, but we're slightly better prepared and have our feet are under us a little bit better than perhaps some other groups do.
That's true.
Okay. All right.
Jean, I know we could talk all day, but I'd like to...
Me? Talk all day? Oh my gosh.
But I would like to just say, we're trying to keep these to a little less than an hour, knowing that we'll be back next week. We can continue the conversation. It's not that this is a one and done. But I would like to say to people, if you have things that you would like us to be covering, if you have different questions, or we can find someone to talk about a topic, I put in my email in the chat, and you're welcome to let me know. We want to make these relevant, and we want them to be really something that people can take away some information to use in their own work in their community. So don't hesitate to let us know what would be helpful. We know in the next few weeks we're going to be learning a lot more about how we're moving forward with school districts, with our unemployment, with getting back into a new norm. So please keep joining us. We want to learn from each other.
Quick question. Could anybody who is answering questions for us newbies who's willing to answer questions, put your email address or a phone number in the chat?
Sure, I'm available, and I know others on here too. I think if you would be welcome, you would welcome some emails from people, please.
I'm fairly new as well, so yeah, I could use some.
Sure. Virtual groups, Travis, you mean as far as getting ahead? Is that what you're wanting to know?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I think it's one thing if you've established a rapport with your group and then move online from there, but to try to start a new group virtually, like with Zoom or something like that, what do people feel about that? I mean, it's so relational, and I agree with Treasure. How do you establish that rapport, that bond with your group?
If you can establish rapport in a group in person, you can do it online. That's the short answer. But you have to adapt what you're doing online to make sure relationship is included.
So it may take an extra few sessions. Is that what you're saying, Stephen?
It takes extra, and Treasure and I have talked about this, it takes a few sessions to get adapted to the technology, maybe one at least, or maybe two, but it's how you do it when you do it that establishes relationships online. So I think it was Travis that was talking earlier about the lack of relationship in the college courses online. You got to do college courses differently. It's not that it's online, it's how you do it.
And
Would you give one example, Stephen?
Well, Treasurer, you wanna take it on? Oh, turn it back on. Your mute's on.
I agree with you. I think it's the cheerleader that's leading the charge that matters, and the get to know you games or the whatever you do. It's all in the leadership, and it's all in how excited you are to be there and how much effort you put into the getting to know you stuff. At the beginning is going to be crucial. It's all about the personalities at the table and the relationships that you can create through them.
It's about the questions you ask. Like if I say, Gene, what was hard today? And what was good? And I listen and I respond in a way that gets him talking more, then it's going to work. But if you don't build that in, yeah.
I have a question. We have been doing case management for our clients for the last couple months. And so what if the clients and the people that are participating know us, they just don't know each other, but they've built a relationship in person with us?
That introduce them to each other.
It sounds like we have a conversation for next week, even.
Oh. How do you build relationship virtually? Online?
Right, between each other. Like they don't know each other, but they all have a very good relationship with us.
I think you remember last week Stephen was talking about putting people into on Zoom. You can put people into rooms together and then let them come back out and talk to the bigger group. So you could utilize that technology for intimate relationship building between each other and let them introduce each other to the whole group. And you're just going to figure out how to do things like that. So that's
a really good point.
You're going to have to be creative.
So what you're really saying is that we have to all be innovative, Treasure, and willing to accept new things, try new things, because this may be the new normal for maybe a year, 15 months. And so we're all going to have to adapt. Near you, Treasure, is the Miami Indian Reservation. And I live near Miami University of Ohio. And the group that I have found to be the most adamantly hateful towards the new system are the college professors there who are now having to teach online. And it goes to what Stephen and you have brought about the relationship thing. This is not what they signed up to do, and they're finding it incredibly difficult. But I think your point is that we, those of us in this movement and this advocacy, are going to have to adapt and adapt quickly to this, because if we don't, it's just not going to happen. And I think this goes to Stephen's point then about relationships.
These changes aren't what any of us signed up for, but we're here to serve, and we need to be able to be flexible and accommodating as best we can. No, all of us are still employed, and we have the accommodations we need. We need to find how best to serve those in need as best we can, and learn to be flexible and gracious, and whatever is necessary to help out there that aren't working, and that, you know, even before this, were underserved, and even more so during, you know, this pandemic. So it's not about what we want. None of this is ideal situations for anybody. No. And professors and anybody else need to understand that you know, when we're there to serve, you serve in whatever capacity and to whatever extent is necessary for those in need.
I'm reminded of what Stephen's boss, Commissioner Pete Gerken, said, is that if you're an introvert and you get into politics, it gets beat out of you and you have to become an extrovert in order to survive. And what I'm hearing from everybody here is a not dissimilar sentiment, is that even if you may not be comfortable or like doing it in this manner or this, we're going to all have to do, and we're all going to have to step up and adapt and cast off our old skins and figure out how to do this.
Well, and I think that, you know, I'm totally willing to adapt. Speaking of being an introvert, you know, this is great. I don't have to be around people, but the reality is that I feel my participants need that relational piece, and so it's more the idea of like, you know, let's look at how we can adapt, and you know, maybe some research on how we can engage communities of poverty with new technologies, you know, and how willing are they to respond to the new. I mean, can they connect to Zoom? And Treasure was talking about how they had to go to McDonald's to connect to their Wi-Fi. I mean, I'm encouraged to hear that they are adapting, but what other kind of methodologies can we come up with to as, you know, facilitators to help our groups out?
Just remember that they are problem solvers, and so as long as they know that you truly care, they will figure it out.
I think Treasure's idea of being the cheerleader is, as the leader, is really a good one. Our curriculum for the residents that we have has been adapted to, and they've used some Zoom, some Google Classroom, something called Netflix Watch, I believe. And so they're using a host of different platforms in order to reach the people who are participating in our classes. And Cheryl was on the call for a few minutes, and she's the person that would know the most about it from our perspective. But everything that you're talking about is really apropos, and I think that cheerleader piece is what really connects people together, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. If people believe you care, they're willing to take the risk to trust you.
So I agree, Miss Katie. This is Lavar from Dayton. How's everybody doing? I would say, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I would say that the prior relationships, I definitely think that's very helpful. And it really has been helpful in our group. And I'm not really sure, because it's taken about, it usually takes about 4 weeks for us to really, you know, kind of gather some relationships with folks. And so one thing we've been using as a supplement to the conference calls or the Zoom is an app called Marco Polo. And I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with that, but it allows you to do a video message. And we've gotten up to about 15 people on that.
Love Marco Polo.
I'm sorry?
I love Marco Polo.
I mean, Marco Polo is great, and it really has been helpful, not only with our class, you know, for doing check-ins and check-outs, but just periodically throughout the week, we're able to, you know, share some good news. We're able to, some people have gotten on there and offered to sing a song. We've been able to type in quotes or just give anything positive. And so that's really been a helpful supplement for us. And we're not only engaging just during our classroom time, but we're engaging throughout the week as well, because you can leave a message on there at any time. And so it alerts you on your phone when you have a message. And so that's really been keeping people uplifted and inspired. But the relational piece is really important, because I'm an energy person, and I like to give high fives and pats on the back and stuff like that. And so I never really, realized how important that agency time is. And for our group, it was creating some momentum. You know, our group was really enjoying coming together. And I know Miss Kathleen is on this call, and she really, this is her first Getting Ahead group, and she really was helpful and instrumental in kind of setting the tone as far as providing the meal and just the atmosphere. And so it's really, really important. And I know, and so I just wanted to share that a little bit. But Marco Polo, if you're not familiar, please check it out. It's just a way to continue to engage. But the relational piece is really huge and really important. Just moving on forward, I am concerned about how do we recruit. And so if Zoom is working or the other tools are working, how do you continue to recruit? And so for me, I'm a in your face type of guy. I'm an out and, just kind of outreach type person where I'm able to get out in the community. And so if we have to continue to work at home, it's going to be tough for me to recruit.
Yeah.
So I know that Lynn wants to end this, so I'm just going to make the suggestion as a parting shot that perhaps the next topic is practical problems and practical solutions. Travis, for example, raised, you still have 2.5-hour meetings. Okay, getting books to a new group. And Treasure says, hey, they just show up and they hand them through the door, along with the cards. So, and is anybody going to plan outdoor gatherings? Which I assume that, may not qualify under the same strict regimes as inside. But Lynn, I just want to say thank you for letting this go on. I think this really testifies to the fact that there's a lot of people who have a lot of interest and need some.
We'll come back next week. We're going to keep talking to each other. And again, we can begin to email. We'll try and get information out. But thank you all for participating.
Thank you.